Four Corners Big 12 pod today. We started with the team that should be mentioned first. BYU, 8-0, 5-0, ranked in the top 10 at number 9. And it is the week of Utah. And when this was on the schedule for the year, you thought about, man, what would BYU be by the end of the year? And it's Utah holding on to try not to finish dead last in the conference with Oklahoma State right now is there. And Paul, BYU, they just seem like they take care of efficient. I don't know if they remind me of 2021 Baylor, the way they're winning. Their defense is very, very good. You don't think so, Craig?
No, they don't run the ball like that.
No. They are tough like that, where they
there's a lot of tough teams.
Yeah. Okay.
But they're tough like that. That's what Kalani Sitake likes. He likes teams that, every time they get up after the play, the other team's like, oh.
Yeah, in fact, he said what bothered him the most when they played in Waco the first time after a long drought of not playing each other was that they weren't the most physical team.
Yeah, so there certainly are that. And look, Utah, in spite of everything, is still that. I expect a super physical game. It's going to be intense. It's going to be it's a rivalry game. It might be the most hated rivalry in the Big 12. Like, no offense to the rivalry, I will not call it the Blue Bonnet Battle, but Utah and BYU just hate each other's guts.
Yeah.
So it's going to be intense.
Utah doesn't give up more than 16-point-something points per game, so they're still playing really good defense. They just can't score.
Yeah, I mean, I like BYU here a lot. They are on the road, so there is that. They've had 2 weeks to prepare, so has their opponents. But BYU feels a lot better about where they sit, and especially the last 2 weeks than their counterparts here. I mean, they basically just have to avoid a trap. That's all there is to this. I mean, and this is one of those games where you throw the records out and you factor in just that it's going to be a heated, hated, brutal, physical battle, and whoever's toughest and I guess either makes the most plays or the least amount of mistakes or both is going to be the team that eventually emerges here. It is interesting that the line dropped from 5 to 3.5 so far this week at least, so tends to mean that there's some folks out there that think this will be a little bit closer than maybe just by looking at the records and saying, oh, well, Utah's clearly not that good and BYU's undefeated, BYU's going to roll them. It's like, no, not necessarily. This is the Holy War. This is a rivalry. Throw the records out again. So you also take into account being in hostile territory and the fact that Utah would love nothing more, and the thing that would salvage their otherwise terrible season would be to beat BYU and give them a loss. So they're going to be motivated, but I think BYU knows what they're in store for. Kalani Sitake knows this rivalry inside and out. So long as they've been able to just maintain their health, I think they've got a great shot to go and win this weekend and to keep winning on out the rest of this season, although there will be more challenges like going to Arizona State here in a couple of weeks. But there's not really much to say about BYU other than they just handled their business. Jake Retzloff's getting much better. Defense is great. And they're starting to get in a run game going these last couple of games with LJ Martin healthy and available. So they just keep doing what they've been doing and don't suddenly start turning the ball over too much or not getting turnovers, then I think that they should be 9-0 after this weekend.
They have played over 100 times. The 100th meeting was back in 2019. It has been a series of streaks. Like BYU had a long streak. Utah dominated forever and ever. I mean, forever and ever. And then up until the game in 2021, BYU winning, Utah had won 9 straight, had won 14 of the last 17. And last year, or 2 years ago, BYU got them 26-17.
I do think this, though, Iowa State, you could kind of tell the last couple of weeks where they were starting to fade a little bit, and so it wasn't a complete 100% across the board unanimous shock when they got beat by Texas Tech, although it was like 98%. But they had kind of shown some signs. BYU's not shown signs of cracking necessarily, but they've won their close games so far, and they've been in trouble on a couple of occasions. So they can be had, I think. And I think Utah, regardless of the record, regardless of the quarterback, is the type of team that could just get in there and get into a fight and land the right punch at the right time potentially. But you've got to finish off BYU. Like, you cannot give them a chance at the end, or based on what we've seen so far, they're going to come through and win the game.
Who was it, Oklahoma State, that had them in trouble?
Oklahoma
Friday
State
night,
had them
2 or 3 weeks ago? Yep.
UCF had them.
Yep.
So they're actually the last 2 games, quite frankly, could have both gone the other direction, and we're talking about a 2-loss BYU team very easily.
Thank you very much, Xavier Wolf, with a super chat. Thank you for that today. Appreciate your time. Thank you all, 365 Sports, a professional and excellent broadcast.
Thank
we
you.
do appreciate your thoughts and also comments. Now, up next, Colorado.
How about we do the other side of the Holy War?
Okay. All right,
Yeah.
Utah.
Utah.
Actually, Utah was who we started with, but we got into Brigham Young.
Yeah.
First time I've said it in 3 months. We got into BYU.
Did we? Did I veer us off course
Yeah,
there?
that's okay. No, that's
That's all
okay.
right.
We mentioned Kyle Whittingham. There are thoughts that this is such a frustrating year. He wants to walk away at some point. They have the coach in waiting, but this you mentioned this, Craig. Utah can make their season and maybe turn it around where they end up with 7 or 8 wins if they can beat their rival in BYU.
Yeah, I think that's where I got off course, was just thinking about how they could salvage that, and I started talking about the Cougars. But for Utah, see, I did it again. For Utah, I mean, this is the biggest game on the schedule. This wasn't necessarily the game you planned on being the biggest overall when all was said and done, but it's going to be, because there's not any bigger games that are going to be on the rest of the schedule, like a playoff or a Big 12 title. Like, all that's not happening. So this is far and away the biggest game on your schedule, and it's the only game remaining on your schedule that could make this year feel any better than the disappointment that it's been. So I think Utah will have their absolute best ready to go. I don't know what their plan is at quarterback. They haven't revealed that yet. Isaac Wilson is in the mix. You got Brandon Rose as well. So we'll see how that is actually divvied up and who they roll with as their starter. Don't really love either guy at this point, especially not compared to their counterpart in Jake Rutzlaff and the way that he's playing right now. But you don't have to win with the quarterback play. You've got a really good defense. You can run the ball a little bit to get Micah Bernard going. But, I mean, it's going to be an uphill battle. And then, again, I think it's going to be a slugfest, so I think that actually plays into Utah's hands. They don't have to win a shootout is what I'm saying. So they can not get tons from their offense and still be in okay position, but they got to get something, and that's not something they've been getting at all lately. That offense has been their bugaboo by far.
I had a couple of BYU fans that chirped in on the game between UCF and BYU. That when we got off course, UCF scored 2 late touchdowns. That game at one point was 34-10. So really, BYU controlled that game, dominated that game, and then UCF scored a couple of touchdowns at the end to make it look a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah, that's very valid, but it was still a very close game at the end that they managed to win. Was really just the overriding point. Not that they were getting dominated or weren't in control, just that they've escaped with a couple of really close wins that could have gone the other way quite easily. And so they've played with fire, and so far they haven't been burned, but they've been close enough to feel like they're not capable of being burned.
For sure, Oklahoma State on the last second touchdown, and then, of course, at Baylor when they blew a 28-7 lead at one point. All right, let's get back to the Four Corners. Colorado is next. How about the Four Corners? 2 of the teams that were thought to have made the best push this year, Arizona, Utah, are down near the bottom. And then you have what we have with Colorado and Dion and company. Man, I look forward to watching. Baylor's off, so no game for us to cover. I look forward to watching this game. This ought to be maybe a flamethrower.
Oh, yeah, I'm pretty sure it will be. Look, they both can score some points. They're both, they have defenses. Colorado has been better. Tex has been serviceable. It was serviceable last week, against Iowa State, holding them just to 22 points when they've given up a lot more than that to most everybody else on the season. So, yeah, I think this one's going to be an absolute slobber knocker of a – not necessarily a slobber knocker. It's going to be a track meet. You're going to see speed. I'm excited about this one. Very, very, very high-scoring game, I think. Bang the over on this.
Who we highlighting here?
Colorado.
Yeah, I think that they're in a really good spot as the 3rd team in the mix right now for the Big 12 championship as far as 1 loss or better. And they have a lot of good mojo going on right now, but I know Joey McGuire and company are going to come rolling in with a lot of their own and looking to play upset and looking to build off last week's win. I do think playing in Boulder is a slight advantage, but not anything crazy. We know they should have lost to Baylor in Boulder about a month ago. So I don't think it's impossible at all for Texas Tech to roll in there and get a win, but I do think Colorado's in a good groove. They seem to be pretty healthy at this stretch when that was a big question mark, especially early on. And I think that they've got an opportunity to really throw the ball around a lot on this Texas Tech defense, if it's anything like the Texas Tech defense that we've seen up until really last week when they had a little bit better of a showing against Iowa State compared to what we had seen immediately before that. So there's an area for Colorado to take advantage potentially. But I like them in this game, and I like them coming off of an open week.
You think if you could set the over-under, Paul, what would you set it at? Just as someone
70.
70?
No, I'm probably 65.
70 is a lot.
70 is a lot. Probably 64, 65.
I can see this being a 40-35 game.
Oh, I can. Yeah, I can.
I don't. I mean, I guess I could see it, but I think Colorado's defense is a bit better than that at this point. I don't know that's going to be straight up shootout, but it very well could be. Yeah, I think Colorado's defense might be the key to kind of tilting it in their direction. If you kind of negate the offenses, I take their unit over the Red Raiders unit. But yeah, it could very well turn into a shootout.
They've gone to some of the fundamentals of what you need to do, which is a lot better protecting Shedeur, although it's not flawless by any means. And then the defense has played really kind of a nice hard-nosed look to them. Ever since the win against Baylor at the end, which was phenomenal, and how that ended, they kind of like all of a sudden it gave them a true belief, not just talk, but the kind of, I guess you say, nuts and bolts of who they are. Arizona State, still such a great story. UCF comes to town, 6 o'clock game on ESPN2. That game is at Sun Devil Stadium. They beat the hell out of Oklahoma State. Scatterboo with what he did. The quarterback healthy again. This might be a shootout. I don't know, but Arizona State can play pretty good defense too.
Yeah, it depends on Scatterboo. I mean, to me and how well they're going to play. I mean, if they don't have their biggest offensive weapon, it's going to be a problem for them.
Oh, yeah.
So, is he going to play? Is he all right? If he does play, is he limited? Is he not the Cam Scatterboo we know? I don't know. I mean, that to me is the big deal here with Arizona State.
That's their big headline. It was great to get Sam Levitt back last week, and he played pretty well. So that's a feather in your cap that you have that you didn't know how long he might be out. So that was good to see, and they're playing with a lot of confidence. They've got bowl eligibility behind them. That was a great step up, earning that last week for Kenny Dillingham and company, and really just not leaving any doubts against Oklahoma State. They rolled into Stillwater. It's taken some Big 12 teams years to go win in Stillwater. They did it in their first chance and didn't leave anything but just dust in their wake, in the wake of Cam Scatterboo. So, yeah, everything hinges on him, but they're pretty good all around, and I think this ought to be a really interesting game with a UCF team that suddenly is playing with a lot of confidence after the quarterback change last week with Dylan Rizek taking over and giving them a different look. But I like Arizona State at home. I think that obviously stopping UCF's run game will be a big part of the equation, but if Rizek's throwing it around, that's another development to have to plan for. So I'm curious to see how Kenny Dillingham responds to the limited film on Rizek, on Risk, excuse me. But yeah, this for them really boils down to Cam Scatterboo and his availability.
Arizona State's defense 27th in the country against the run, which of course, as you meant, Risk is now playing the quarterback position. That changes up a lot of what UCF might be able to do, but they've been pretty stingy against the run, which, of course, UCF puts up monster numbers led by R.J. Harvey. Now, Arizona. Man, I tell you what, there's guys we follow ever since before. I guess when started to think about, are they going to be a part of the Big 12? Jason Shear, Michael Luke, among others. There's heat right now on Brennan. Lots of heat on him. Some not demanding, but you need to change something on offense and defense or coaching staff or whatever. There was even a little bit of smoke about whether or not he would survive until next year, as they've had a disappointing start with Fafita and McMillan, the two weapons, but they just haven't clicked this year. Though they've had big stat games, but as far as the team, Arizona.
Yeah, you're going to have to forgive me for being a little bit sleep deprived. I realize now what I screwed up. I started talking about BYU because it connected, but we're doing the four corners.
You don't have to apologize about that.
No, I know, but now I'm realizing why I stumbled into that is because I just lumped them in with the four corners, and they're not. They're part of the Bob Bowlesby pod.
Bob Bowlesby would be
Yeah,
pissed.
so that's my bad for lumping them in. We should have just – we'll have to get to them, in the correct order. But Arizona is just a giant mess. They stink. And I'm tired of talking about the same two players and the same two players alone. They're great players, Noah Fafita and Teteroa McMillan, but you can't just have two guys, basically. And they've had other guys who have been good players. Some of them have gotten hurt, especially on defense. But the offense is atrocious, especially for having two players of that caliber. They really have not much else besides those two, so it's feast or famine, and it was a lot of famine last week, even though they were still able to connect. They're always going to be able to connect. They've been connecting since high school, but you have nothing else other than that, basically. And so, I think, injuries were something you could point to at least early on, but clearly the coaching turnover has created more issues, as we expected. And then it kind of got like, no, they've got these guys coming back. Nobody really left and this and that. I know Jason Shearer, our buddy, was really positive on them, and he's had to completely course correct because they did not see this kind of a fall coming. So, it's all bad in Tucson right now, and to the point that you made of they're actually talking about job security. I think that's ridiculous for a first-year head coach, no matter where you are, much less at a non-powerhouse football place like Arizona. Like, who the hell are you to be replacing football coaches midway through the year in year number one? Like, What do you think, you're Alabama or something? But if it's that bad to where you are having that conversation, maybe you just eat it and you go, this is a horrible hire, and we're going to, before we cause any further damage, just go ahead and get rid of this guy. I don't know if that's really where it is and where it will go, but it has not been good, and it's not been anywhere close to the level that you would have expected with two mega stars coming back in your two studs, Fafita and McMillan. So this has been a bad year. It doesn't look like it's got much room to get any better. And so I'm very curious to see just how the temperature continues to rise or not for the Brent Brennan regime now. This is a very forgettable first year in the Big 12.
I'll tell you this. I think that, we know for sure Ted McMillan gone. He's going to be a first-round draft pick, so they're not getting him back. Well, part of the thing that brings a Noah Fafita back other than NIL is that you have Ted McMillan there to, help you along the way. Well, now that he's gone, Fafita is not, after this year, not going to be what you call a draftable quarterback, but he's still really talented. I don't know if they'll be able to keep him out of the portal, especially if there's coaching turmoil. I would say that there's already people that are like, he's on that list with John Mateer, where John Mateer's got people hitting him up in his DMs all the time going, Pullman, Washington's beautiful. That's the Palouse, all that stuff. But where else is also beautiful? Atlanta.
Miami, Florida.
And the surrounding areas like Athens, Georgia, whatever. It's not them. Or, have you been to Tuscaloosa? They love college football there.
Yeah, there's a lot of nice hedges in South Carolina that have been torn down from storming the field. By the way, on the UCF Arizona, go back to that for a second. UCF's offense, we know that both teams love to run the football. Scatterboo at Arizona State and a plethora of guys at UCF, including Harvey. They're 34th, UCF, against the run, 27th for Arizona State. So whoever can hold up that end of the bargain has a good chance. But both, of course, quarterbacks are playing well. The risk with the new one at UCF who's starting to play, and also with Arizona State's health.
Yeah, UCF kicked their ass, had a big moment before halftime, had a lot of big moments throughout that game. I mean, they just utterly dominated and didn't leave much doubt. So that was a horrific loss for Arizona. Their fifth straight. They are lucky that Utah was there for the taking, and they were able to beat them for a second year in a row, because outside of that, they would be right there next to Oklahoma State at winless in the Big 12. So it's been bad, man. And I did want to say on BYU, I know that I already screwed up by including them in this pod to begin with. That's a very valid point the person brought up, whoever that was, about the UCF game and how it looked closer at the end. I would counter with SMU then. They've had a couple. That was my overall point. Was they've had a couple games they've won at the end that were close. UCF's probably not the best example, so thank you for correcting me there. So let's swap out SMU, which turns out to be a great win. Point is, they played with fire and they've remained unburned, but You do that often enough, that's not going to be the case.
They have found a way to win up until this point. If I'm the only one allowed to screw up who we talk about within the pod.
I did it once.
Yeah, you did. You just went off on a tangent about like Vanderbilt or something like that. Not even in the conference.
I was just so excited about the Holy War that we had to get straight to that and just skip
we have
the
two